Introduce myself. My name is Natasha Hartson. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship and Innovation with Wood Buffalo Economic Development Corporation. And I have with me today 3 panelists, and I have Jennifer Warren from my team, Economic Development Officer, who will be my backup in the event that I do have to go deal with my 3-year-old. So joining us today, we have Kevin Weidlich, who's the CEO and President of WBEDC. And he's here to tell you a little bit about what we're working on in terms of support for the business community. I also have Staci Millard of S. Millard Chartered Accountants, and she's here to speak on some considerations businesses should be thinking about beyond the government relief options that are out there. And finally, we have, and last but not least, I should say, Vanessa Cheeseman is joining us. She's a workforce consultant with the Government of Alberta, and will speak to some of the programs that are available today. So just to kick it off and to let you guys know, the purpose of these calls right now is really to try and share information with you. We understand there's a lot going on right now. We understand many of you are under severe stress and anxiety, and we're trying our best to relay information to you as quickly as we can. Bear with us in the sense that we're learning at the same time you are. These things are happening very rapidly, and they're changing moment by moment. I understand there might have been some even announcements this morning that we may or may not be up and up on. So please be patient with us. A big part of what we will do is take the questions that we learn from this call, or that you ask us from this call, and we will be sending out communications to the group on any of the questions we can't answer. We will also be putting them on our website at choosewoodbuffalo.ca. And I invite you as well to continue to have conversation with us at info@choosewoodbuffalo.ca for questions that you have, and our 1-800 number. Following the end of the call, I will put all of that information up so you can take that down. I also wanted to take this moment really quickly to emphasize, which I'm sure you're hearing lots of, is to really be taking care of yourselves in terms of mental health and your employees' mental health. I understand this is going to be exceptionally challenging. There is a lot of resources that are being put out there, so please check in with your other small business owners. I hope you think of yourselves as a small community that you can reach out to one another and chat. So yeah, make sure that's a forefront in your mind. There is a few webinars that Fuse Social is hosting in the next couple weeks, so I really encourage you to check those out. One of them, for example, is managing mental health in the workplace. So yourself or your employees may benefit from attending some of those webinars. And yeah, that is it from me. What I will do now is I will pass it on to Kevin to kick it off from the Economic Development team. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Natasha. I trust we're all good. So the COVID-19 public health emergency, it represents unprecedented disruption. It's not unique to our region, it's actually throughout the world. So we're facing a scale of a public emergency that none of us has actually seen in more than a generation. So so this is something that we are really in uncharted waters. And so as Natasha mentioned, we're learning as we're going. There's 3 things that are pretty that are predominant amongst many business owners. 3 things they're called them pressure points, and they're really about cash flow, access to information, but most importantly, employee safety. So largely the employee safety measures have already been deployed, and they're getting fine-tuned and undertaken in right now, in fact, and getting developed over time. The issues around cash flow are about to become very acute. Many businesses have been feeling it for quite some time in this region because we've been through a rough time. I'll speak to that in a second. As far as access to information goes, today is one of our first big steps with Buffalo Economic Development Corporation to undertake a way to assist with access to information. So this morning's webinar is really centered on that. If I can go back to the cash flow crunch and the fact that that businesses here have taken a hit. So in the first quarter of this year, we've endured some pretty significant economic headwinds. So think of the investment flight of capital that was going on in late 2019 and certainly recently, and also the decision to stop projects like the Suncor cogeneration plant. So economic investment capital flight. And then not long ago, this country was, the supply chain was getting disrupted through blockades. And blockades were designed to put pressure on getting hydrocarbon assets to market as a natural gas. That hurts this local economy significantly. Whether it's natural gas or not, it's simply we get the impact. And finally, the last two are very closely related, the oil price crash. So we had a significant oversupply from OPEC, OPEC's dispute with Russia. Canada took the brunt of that, likewise the United States. And so oil prices are low, and at the same time, demand plummets because of COVID-19. That's the situation that we're in. So we have some work ahead of us, but I could talk about this for quite some time, and really the purpose is to answer your questions. So I'm going to sum up.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. I will now pass it to Staci if you wanted to go now, Staci. Thanks.
Just figuring out the unmute button.
No problem.
Okay, so maybe I'll just start really briefly because I know there's been a lot of questions. My phone has blown up already about the Prime Minister's announcement about 45 minutes ago relating to some of the federal government programs. I think I just wanted to mention we don't have a lot of details on the 75% wage announcement or the limit increase or the $40,000 loan. So I hope everyone can be patient with us through this phone call. That announcement is just as new for us, and we were trying to get ready for this meeting. I don't think we have a lot of answers. But what I do want to speak about is how we as business owners can be resilient beyond the government relief. And I'm just going to say I do think the government relief will definitely help us, but to be resilient as business owners and make it out the other side of this, we have to be focusing on what we can control within our businesses. So I have a list of a few things here that I think are critical. The first one being mindset. And a great example is I notice myself when I'm at home on the weekends checking social media, I'm focused on sort of the crisis of the moment, and I get to this point where I can't even think almost. It's sort of a block in my mind. And I think it's critical that you find time to step back and find clarity, and then use that time to think of what you can do to overcome some of these challenges. So number one being mindset. What can you control? Having that to go forward on is going to give you the leverage that you need to think of possibilities and solutions instead of being in a state of fight or flight. So once you can find that, the first thing I'm going to encourage people to do is look at what they can cut for costs. If you don't have your bookkeeping up to date or you don't have your accounting up to date, don't worry. Pull your last month's bank statement, look at everything that you spent, because right now, cash being the biggest crunch, you need to figure out everything that you can save. So I know a lot of software providers are giving discounts up to 50%. So taking a look at any of those recurring payments, what can you have reduced by calling in? Obviously, what payments can be deferred. I understand there's maybe some challenges there, but putting in your best effort to reduce as much in cash flow as you possibly can. The third thing is looking at increasing sales. And I think this is where, with a lot of the business owners that we've been in touch with, this is where they hit a roadblock, because by the time that they've cut costs, they're back into a state where they're more in crisis. And I'm going to suggest that you take another few minutes, find some clarity, find some space alone, and then start writing. Take down as many ideas as you can on ways to increase your sales. Don't stop at one or two. Those aren't going to be your solution. Make 10, 15, 20, a list of everything you can think of. If you are not online, you need to be somehow. So we've seen business owners, for example, retailers who don't have websites, that are having Facebook Live or Instagram Live videos once a day or twice a day to at least showcase their product. So there are so many methods to get you in front of your customers. Then that is what you need to be doing. I know some business owners say to me, but that we don't have a retail product, we're service-based. How can you take your service to your customer without having to physically be in front of them? You know, a thought that comes to mind is hairstylists. So there's so many people who are worried about covering up the grays, and how can you get in front of those people then? Is there a way that you can give them something to use at home so that they're your customers a month or 2 months from now? Something to keep them happy, keep them coming back to your location. So what can you do without having to physically be there? And make that list of 20 ideas so that you can figure out which ones might actually work. But let's be proactive through this. The fourth thing I want to address is your people. So until today, until this most recent announcement, I know that the number one biggest cost beside rent was the teams. And it is incredibly hard as a leader to have to potentially lay off some of your team, understanding the human aspect behind it and how that might put families in a cash crunch. And one of the things that I was encouraging our business owners to think about, though, is that this should be weeks, maybe months, but this crisis alone will not last years. And if you choose to pay your team and you don't have money, if you think I can only make it 3 or 4 more weeks paying the team and then I'm done, I'm encouraging you to please consider laying them off so that you have enough cash to weather the storm and rehire them so they have a job, because they will be better off to have had EI for 6 weeks and then have a job on the other side of this than for you to pay them for a couple weeks and then have nothing. So just a different perspective on that. We want to keep people healthy and happy, but if you're going to lose your business over paying your team, please consider some of the other solutions that the government's providing. And the fifth is just with loans. I know that there's a reluctance for people to take on any more debt. I can completely understand that fear, but if you have the capacity to apply for a loan, in fact, if you don't even if you don't think you need it, I encourage you to apply for it anyways, because the timeline on getting a loan isn't short. It takes weeks for that to come into place. And if you get to a point a few weeks from now where you do need it, the cash might be too late. So apply for it now. I know, for example, ATB, our premier was announcing that ATB is extending some loans. You can have a loan authorized that you don't have to draw on. So that might be an idea, just to make sure that you've got that safety net if you need it. But I would encourage you to prepare that way in case that time comes. And the other thing I'll mention with loans is some of the challenges we've seen with business owners is if they're behind with CRA, they are not eligible to get loans through ATB or BDC. You could look at getting loans from other entities. There's, I guess, riskier lenders out there who would give you money to pay off the government balances, and then BDC would step in, for example, to pay off those loans. So reach out to the banks, reach out to your accountant, and find that community to go through ways that you can safeguard your business. Don't feel like you're alone in this, right? Everybody is here to help. The lenders are here to help as best possible. The same with the accountants. Like, find that community and troubleshoot ways to make sure that you're going to have enough cash to weather the storm, and making sure that you're in front of your customers or your clients so that they're still aware that you are here to support them through this crisis. That's all for me.
Great. Thank you, Staci. I really appreciate your tips there for the community. I also want to mention just now, I'm seeing a lot of stuff going on in the chat. If you have a question, just to keep it a little easier for us to answer them, if you can answer them, if you can put them in the Q&A question and answer box at the bottom of the screen. So you should be able to see that around a little icon with some clouds. If you want to enter your questions in there, that'd be really helpful, because I think that you may lose some of your questions in the chat. Anyway, I'd like to pass it now to Vanessa Cheeseman.
Thanks, Natasha. Thanks everybody for having me. And I'm just going to very briefly go over some of the GOA supports that are available for businesses. And as you guys know, it's very fluid. Things are changing, and just like the announcement that the federal government just made, I'm sure it will have an impact on provincial stuff that's going to be happening. But I think it's really important that you guys have and know where to go for some of this information. So I'm just going to be sharing that. I'm going to share my screen here now. So this is the main website that that you guys can go to. There's a couple here, but what I'm going to do is supports for businesses.
I think, Vanessa, your screen is your backdrop right now.
So you can see my face right now.
You can see the beautiful ocean.
Hold on. Can you guys see it now? Natasha?
Sorry, Vanessa?
Oh,
What'd you say?
sorry. No, I just didn't know if you could see the screen now.
I'm still seeing the beautiful view. I hope you took that photo.
No, I didn't, but it's from my hometown. I don't know why this is not working.
Maybe unshare your screen and then try again.
Yeah, I can't even get back to the main Zoom right now. That's the Zoom page. I can't get out of it.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen so it stops you from sharing yours, and we'll see. Sorry, everyone. We'll just bear with us on technical difficulties. We've all
Maybe while we're waiting, I've seen a couple of questions that I might be able to respond to, unless we're going through some the technical stuff. So I saw one question from Nick Sanders regarding the current discussion around the mayor's motion that will be discussed this evening. This is the shelter in place clause of the mayor's motion. So how will that affect small business? So really, the simple answer is I put it to the participants, how will that motion affect you? And so please give that some thought and communicate directly to council. This is the great thing about council meetings is they're always open to speakers to come to council and to share with them the impact to your business or your group of businesses. I would encourage, and that can be done by simply going to the municipal website and registering to speak to council as a speaker. That can be done this evening, in time for this evening. So if you can free up the time, and if you can speak to council directly on the business on the agenda, I'd encourage you to do so. And I know that the councillors would be grateful to hear from you.
I think I'm okay to share now, Natasha, but
okay, you want to try again? All right.
Can you guys see that now?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. So what I'm going to talk about is some of the supports for employers during this time. And the main one that came out for that will help businesses, and it will help you with some of your staff that had to take time off during this isolation period, is the Emergency Isolation Support Fund. And I know a lot of people have heard about this in the past couple of days, and so I'll just briefly go over it. So eligible working Albertans can receive a one-time emergency isolation support payment of $1,146 if they were required to self-isolate or are the sole caregiver of someone in self-isolation. It's a temporary program that will bridge until the federal emergency care benefit is available in April. So the eligibility is that if you do not have benefits through your employer. So as an employer, if you do not have paid working or paid sick leave, and your employees could apply for this. If you are self-employed, or if such as like a massage therapist or something like that, then you could qualify for this. You have to be patient with us currently. It's the system has been hit very, very hard in the past couple of days, and it has crashed. I was told as of 9 a.m. it's back up and running right now, so people can go back in and start their application again. So those benefits just run until April 1st, and then after that you would be applying for the federal program, and obviously that's changing, but there is a federal program as an employer or someone who is self-employed. You may not be paying into EI, so you would qualify for this new Canada Emergency Response Benefit, and that's the $2,000 a month that the Prime Minister was speaking about, that people can apply for up to 4 months. So as immediate cash and to support you and your family as an employer or your employees who may not qualify for other benefits, then that's what you guys would qualify for. There are other options of the temporary layoffs when it comes to your workforce. If it gets to the point like Staci was talking about where you need that cash flow and you have to free up some money, there's options of temporary layoffs, and then there's the options of like the permanent and the termination of employment. So what I will do is I will send out some links to all of this information. And I will also send out my contact information. So if anybody has any questions, I can answer the provincial stuff. The federal stuff, I can basically just reference you back to the federal sites. And I know right now, obviously they're very bogged down, but I may be able to just answer some of the basic questions for you guys and support in any way that I can. But there are some really good links and websites that I will send out. But what I think you should do is that you should write down these benefits so that you can reference them again. So write down the emergency isolation support and so that you can kind of keep it clear, because there are so many different benefits coming out, is just keep a tally of what is available to you guys. So you possibly have the emergency isolation support, you possibly have employment insurance, you possibly have the support for the support for individuals in facing unemployment. So this new emergency response benefit. So just kind of keep a tally so that you can identify what you may be eligible for. Like Staci said, just start a list, take a paper, start writing. And with the links that I send out, make sure that you save these links, because they are the links to the pages that are being updated on a daily basis. Because they are changing, it's very important to keep going back to them and updating the information and updating yourself on what is available. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Vanessa. Okay, so we've heard from everyone now. What I think that what we can do now is move to some of the questions. We've had some people who submitted questions prior to the meeting, so I might start there. And some of them, just so you guys are aware, some of these questions we may or may not have the answers to. I will pose the question to the group, and each one of us may put in a comment or two on the questions, depending on what it is. And just bear with us. Like I said, if we aren't able to get to all the questions today, we'll try our best to summarize the questions and provide a list of them on our website following the call. But anyway, we'll get started. A really easy one that I can answer myself here is, what is SME? I understand that we may have gone out with a title that was a little confusing to some people, so I apologize. Sometimes we use acronyms in our industry that maybe people don't know. SME is small and medium enterprise, so moving forward we will start to refer to it as the business roundtables, but just as a point of clarity, that was asked as a question. A question that's been coming up actually in the chat as well as previously asked is a question regarding what the RMWB will be doing for business owners through this pandemic. So we've discussed a lot around, not a lot, but high level around some Alberta and federal programs. People are wondering what the RMWB will be doing for business owners in this pandemic. So I can pose the question. I probably could answer it, but I can see if anyone else too would like to jump in on that question. Go ahead, Kevin.
Sure, thanks, Natasha. So at the council meeting last Tuesday evening, they passed a motion to establish a post-emergency financial recovery task force. So that's to develop programming and specific business supports that can be implemented immediately following the lifting of the last of any provincial or local health restrictions. So that's not for right now. We need to get our heads wrapped around this. And there's a whole bunch of other supports that are coming from all the other orders of government, especially province and the federal. In fact, in the chat, I just shared a news article that talked about what the Prime Minister had just announced 40 minutes ago regarding loans and wage subsidies. So that's a step in the right direction at that level. At the municipal level, we need to give this some serious thought, because so many things are happening right now and being offered by other orders of government. It doesn't make sense for us to duplicate that, and we also don't want to simply throw money at a problem where we don't really know if it's going to have an effect. So that's the reason for the establishment of this task force. And so we're in the midst of as CEO of Wood Buffalo Economic Development, I've been charged with figuring out what that task force needs to look like, who should be on it, and how we can obtain information. So we're literally developing that now, and I would say on Monday we should be able to put out a news release announcing the members of that committee of the task force, and there will be mechanisms to have a wider business community participation as far as inputs as to what we can undertake. But I want to emphasize the purpose of this task force is to develop programs and supports post-emergency as soon as possible, but post-emergency. So that's the headspace that we're putting into it right now.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. I just wanted to add to that comment. I think I want to just remind people that this situation is a lot different than the fire. So I understand I was heavily involved in the business recovery plans for the wildfire. And so I understand the expectation that the municipality or things will come out with cash immediately. Unfortunately, we're in a very different situation than we were during the fire, as the entire country and world is impacted by this. So the funding in terms of Red Cross and those types of things just isn't available to the same level that it was during the fire. So I really understand the stress and the understanding that you're looking for financial input, but bear with us in terms of speed on that. We need to make sure that we consider all of the federal and provincial programs that will filter down first, and then to be fiscally responsible as a municipality, then to start looking at potential cash injections at that point. We don't want to run out, starting programs before all of those programs are announced. Not to say that these won't come, just that I wanted to emphasize that it is different than the fire in that regard. However, that being said, we did learn a lot from the fire and how the financial support was. I understand that it took a long time to come out. There was a lot of administrative challenges, etc. So in some ways, we are really in an advantaged position to be able to disseminate in potential financial support if that is the case, because we have done it before. So that's just what I wanted to add to what Kevin had mentioned on that question. If any other of the panelists want to make comment. Okay, I'm just looking through the questions here as I see some of them coming in. What advice do you have for sole proprietors or self-employed peoples whose contracts have dried up or are not being honored? Does anyone have any recommendations on that?
It's Staci. I wanted to speak to that a little bit. So one of the words that keeps coming up for us lately is pivot. I understand that we're focused on what we've lost and the contracts that aren't there and the plans that we've made that are no longer being honored. So if you have a contract in place and those people are still legally required to pay, then I would definitely seek legal advice about that. That could be challenging at this very moment with those businesses being affected, lawyers' office is likely being affected. So maybe put that in your parking lot to deal with for a couple weeks from now. In the meantime, you need to be focused on what can you be doing, so that you have those skills and the expertise of what you provided to those contracts, and taking a look at how you can deliver that to the public in another way. So if you're providing communication services, how can you get to the companies that are still open and offer them some service, so that maybe you had one large contract, but now you're helping 10, 20 smaller companies with a little bit of communication work. So the word is pivot. How can you take what you had, take the skills that you have, and go in another direction with it?
Thank you, Staci. Oh,
sorry. Just to add to that, I think too, financially, that immediate need of, you need the money for food and rent and whatnot. Some of these new benefits are going to just help cover some of that. Obviously, our cost of living is a little bit higher, but it's going to assist for that immediate need. So again, in those links that I send out for the Canada Emergency Response and the Alberta Emergency, you can kind of get some support through that for the immediate need.
Thanks, Vanessa. I think a couple of these are more statements, but we may be able to speak to them a little bit. What are we saying here? Rent for businesses also needs to be deferred. Currently, banks are only helping landlords defer for 3 months. That's not enough. This crisis will last at least 2. Once we begin operating, we'll need time to generate funds to restructure payments to our suppliers. I understand that's not necessarily a question, but I'm wondering if anyone has any comment on landlords and rent deferrals.
I can take a stab at that. I agree with the statement. I think landlords need to do whatever they can to allow the deferral of rents. I think all municipal and business leaders should be calling for that as well. I'm one of them, and I'm calling for it. So I don't necessarily think that we should. I don't disagree with the idea of ensuring that businesses can get some degree of support to get them through the rental period, but I think we're all in this together. And I really think that landlords need to recognize that the businesses that are their renters give them a cash flow, and right now they're hurting, and the choice is nothing, or perhaps giving them a break and on some deferral.
I'd like to chime in too. I've had some business owners who approached it a little differently than others. Well, I think that it's extremely frustrating. I'm in the boat where my landlord's not going to touch our rent. So it's extremely frustrating when they possibly have that ability to defer payments. But one of the biggest successes I saw is a friend of mine who owns a business, and she went to her landlord and said, listen, I'm asking you to try to defer your mortgage payment. I'm going to help with the penalties or the interest that is going to be the cause of this. And when she approached it differently, it just puts the context differently. So sometimes the rent discussions feel like we want to chase the landlords out of town with a pitchfork, but a lot of them are humans too. And the Premier said the other day, some of the landlords, not all of them by any means, but some of them are individuals who are using the money that they collect from rents to feed their own kids. And we have to be mindful of that, and even mindful of that when we're looking to the municipality or looking to the provincial government to ask for assistance, that there is not just one solution for it all. So if you can use the human aspect to go to your landlords and ask for that relief in a way that's mutually beneficial. And like Kevin said, if you can explain to them, like, you're going to be out a tenant in 2 months, I think that like being able to explain a little differently instead of coming at it aggressively might be more beneficial.
Thanks, Staci.
And just one last thing, Natasha,
Sure.
if you don't mind. One of the recommendations that I gave to council on Tuesday night was to encourage property tax deferral, which obviously would benefit landlords. And the purpose of that is to enable landlords to be able to make a positive decision with regards to rent deferrals. So that's one thing that the municipality could consider. I'm pretty certain that they're doing the math on that. And of course, the province recently announced the education property tax deferral program as well. So this would be the other half of that. And obviously, this is something that council needs to consider as an option. It does have an impact on the funds within the municipality. And one of the things that we always got to remember is what we deal with the problem in the short run, down the road, we're going to wind up dealing with that problem. Having said that, the urgency of ensuring that businesses are able to get through a very difficult period, I think it's quite acute, and I think most leaders are motivated to help with that.
Great, thanks, Kevin. On that regard, it kind of segues well into another question around taxes and utilities. I may formulate this question a little differently because I do know, and Staci, you've mentioned it a couple times around looking at how you can decrease some payments. I'm wondering, maybe Vanessa, you could help in describing some of the things the province has brought forward in terms of utility payments and WCB and a few other ways in which you might be able to reduce cash flow, or expenses, I should say, sorry, to increase cash flow. I'm not sure if, Vanessa, you're comfortable to speak to that.
Yeah, I actually I tagged a link there in the conversation to the supports that are available for employers, and they can go through that. So it's the emergency isolation support, the corporate income tax changes, education property tax, as Kevin spoke about, the deferral. You can defer your WCB payments up until 2021, your utility payment deferral, so you can defer some of your utility payments. There's certain banks and credit unions that are giving, like Staci spoke about before, some credit for that. There's employment insurance benefits for individual employers if they're paying into that. And then there's a ton of other resources on there. So there is that link that I just put in the chat box is a direct link to this website. And that's the one I think that employers should check on a daily basis, because that's where any of the supports for employers from the province will be posted.
Thanks, Vanessa. I have a two-part question that was sent in advance. First part is, banks are not loosening restrictions on loans or extensions. Their criteria is the same as it was before the pandemic. This limits the help available to small businesses, as most have recently had to weather the economic downturn. How can the government work with the banks to set up more accessible criteria? That's the first part of the question. And then the second part being, business interruption insurance isn't applicable, people are being denied under the pandemic. Is there an opportunity for, I'm assuming, government to work with insurance companies to change this? So really banks and insurance. Does anyone have any comments regarding that? This one's a hard one. Do you want to say something, Staci, or?
Well, yeah, like I guess we don't really have any bankers on the call, and some of the rules that are set are federally around banking are federally mandated, and they have investors. It takes a long time to make some changes. So one of the suggestions that I had earlier is, if you can't get a deferral, try and find a way for another loan. I know we've had some clients at BDC said wouldn't be able to help just because they do have, like I mentioned, outstanding taxes, but there are some short-term loan people that are available to try and find those workarounds. So what I'm hoping is, like some of the online solutions, or when you email in and just ask for a deferral, they're pretty templated and they don't really provide a lot of help. But if you can actually contact an agent, like we have, most of our banks have representatives here in town that you can get in touch with, I'm hoping that they can work with you to try to find another way around maybe those deferrals that they can't offer. One example is, I heard that mortgage payments, if you haven't been with the bank for 6 months, they can't defer it. So what else can you do instead? Maybe they can offer you a line of credit to make those payments, something like that.
Yeah. On that link I sent before, also there's it states right on there that credit unions and ATB are they're offering assistance to businesses and possible deferrals and whatnot. So just keep looking on the website and keep trying to stay on top of that information and stuff that's coming out, because as time goes on, there will be more updates.
Yeah, as both of you have mentioned, I think the situation is quite fluid and we're hearing of different things. I also think the banks are really challenged with a significant increase in influx of people connecting with them to get these answers. So obviously, again, be patient. There are employees behind those phones too. And so I think it's just a matter of they have the ability to ramp up. I just want to make comment on the insurance piece. I completely understand how frustrating that may be. I think what happened following the fire is that everybody felt they learned their lesson from the fire and were very good about going to get business insurance. And now to being in the situation we are today, where you have insurance and it isn't valid, I imagine is incredibly frustrating. What I want to emphasize to people, I suppose, is just to think again, if because of the scenario that we're in, the insurance industry would go bankrupt if it had to actually pay out on something of this magnitude. And so this is why I believe that that's not happening. I do understand that Insurance Bureau of Canada on their website does say certain policies will cover certain things. So very much need to talk to your individual brokers on what your policy says, but unfortunately that it's pretty much across the board isn't, so it's not like you're just the only ones out there. There's a lot of people that are in that same boat, and that I think that's why the government programs will have to step in a little bit heavier than they would otherwise. So that I muted myself too quick. I need to give you guys another question. 1 second here. Sorry, I'm just reading. I'm trying to read them and to say them out to you guys at the same time. So does the RMWB or WBDC have any task force or satellite office where people can reach out to find what is available to them, as people might not have the info? Absolutely. So at this point, we have our website is choosewithbuffalo.ca/COVID-19. You can get information there where we've put a lot of these links that Vanessa has shared and others, and we'll continue to update that on a regular basis. Additionally, please feel free to connect with us on any of our social media accounts, which is at WBECDev. I will at the end put a link up to all these things. As well, we do have a 1-800 number that you can call, which I don't know off heart. So I apologize. I will tell it to you now, but again, I'll post it at the end of the call. It's 1-855-923-2338, and that you can. Right now, we are not working in the office, as you can see behind me. I'm in my living room. However, we do have access to the voicemail for that 1-800 number, so please leave a voicemail there, and we will do our best to get back to you. And I think the other way you can touch base with us is at info@choosewithbuffalo.ca. So we are also considering a number of other opportunities to potentially connect with the business community, be it maybe a phone hotline, an online group where people can connect with one another and to us. So keep in touch with us, and we will continue to share with you guys what we are doing in that regard. To continue on that question, the next one is, how are you vetting/recruiting members for the task force? Kevin, I think that would be you.
Yeah, thanks, Natasha, and it's a good question. So the task force is a Wood Buffalo Economic Development Task Force. So we've set it up as, in fact, we're drafting the terms of reference right now. The basic concept is this: we have a main committee. That's set up by invitation. So we sent out invitations to potential committee members, and once we have the confirmations for those members on the main committee, that will be we'll publish that and share that. As part of the process, to ensure that we have a proper input and wide input into the task force, we'll also ask the committee members to strike subcommittees. And so right now we're considering basic sectors of small business, oil and gas sector, the tourism sector, and help me out here, Natasha, what's the fourth, do you remember?
The financial sector, I believe.
Thank you, exactly. Yeah, of course, Staci's right here, I'm embarrassed now. So, so the financial sector. So those four sectors is what we're looking at establishing subcommittees. But of course, the main committee will also decide if there's additional subcommittees or if there's too many, frankly. And those subcommittees will be open for people to express interest in participating, and we'll ask a chair of each of those subcommittees to go through a process with another main committee member to select the participants of those subcommittees. So that's the task force makeup. And I got the names to invite for the main committee as suggestions from members of our board of directors and also from our leadership team, and we had a discussion as to how we could ensure that we have a broad and proper representation. Many of those individuals have already been connected by telephone, and like I say, once we know the outcome of that. Finally, like this forum, we will also host forums like this to drill into specific issues as well. But I want to remind everybody that the purpose of that task force is a post-emergency recovery task force. So we're not going to come up with solutions today. We're going to come up with solutions that we can execute after the health restrictions are lifted.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Another question, Staci, you might be able to answer is they talked about deferring personal income tax filing, but what about GST filing?
So the actual filing deadlines in any of the press conferences that I have heard haven't actually addressed filing deadlines. So this morning, the Prime Minister announced GST payment relief. Corporate tax payment relief has been addressed at a federal and provincial level, but the deadlines haven't specifically been postponed. That being said, there is interest and penalty relief provisions in place with both of the governments. So, you know, we always approach it that we'd prefer not to ask for make a mistake and ask for forgiveness. We'd like to just file on time. But if that's something that's really not a possibility for you, then I would have to think that the government would be waiving late filing penalties given the pandemic.
Yeah, thanks, Staci. I actually don't know the answer to this, and I don't know if anyone does. What's the eligibility criteria to qualify for the federal government's $25,000 that was announced earlier? Does anybody have any information on that yet? I understand it was really just came out.
I can speak to that as well. So that was any corporations that were eligible for the small business deduction. So under 500,000 of profit. Really the majority of, I guess, our local businesses who are probably tuning in, and that was one of the qualifying factors.
Okay.
And maybe I'll just address, because I've had a lot of questions as well, people asking if that also qualified for owner's wages, and there was no exclusion on that. I did notice that there was some comments about sole proprietors and also nonprofits applied, but sole proprietors and partnerships were maybe excluded, and the government was looking to address that issue because they did not intend to leave those out.
Okay. I also don't know the answer to this one, and I don't know if anyone on the call will. So in our worst case scenario that a business has to go into bankruptcy, is there going to be a no-fault option for those businesses? Can the municipality help create a no-fault option to ease the collapse that is not their fault? I'm not certain that I know if anyone on this call has the expertise to answer that question, so my apologies, we aren't able to answer that one. Just thought I'd pose it in case somebody knew. I'm just looking through the questions to see. A few of them are quite similar regarding rent and the municipality getting involved in rent subsidies. So as Kevin has mentioned, that is not a role that the municipality is currently playing. Whether or not a financial subsidy is offered is likely not coming anytime soon. So this likely, if there is any sort of rent subsidy, would have to come from a federal or provincial program. Is the RMWB engaged in receiving stimulus funding from the province and feds, and how can that be into projects quickly? I don't know, Kevin, if you have any knowledge on that one.
No, like we can't really speak for the municipality. We're not, we don't represent the municipal administration. But I can say in a broad sense, in a general sense, that both the municipality and our corporation monitor very closely potential grant funding for organizations like ourselves, and likewise the administration. So as those become available, and some of them will be very targeted, some of them are grant programs that we already apply to, that we can purpose for this, then we'll apply for that, and as we receive it, we'll act accordingly. Also, other organizations may offer grant programs which we may be eligible to apply to this emergency situation.
So I'll just jump in on that one, because I do believe they may have been speaking around more stimulus funding related to construction. So also just to echo what Kevin's saying, we can't actually speak to that at this time, but I would recommend that everyone who believes that they could participate in something of that nature is to visit the RMWB procurement website and to register for their online vendor registry, so that you're in the know on what's happening. Additionally, ensure that you are checking out Alberta Purchase Connect. That's where you'll find any information on any federal, well, actually all levels of government need to post into that area for any construction level stimulus packages that would happen. So at this point, we don't have any knowledge of anything, understanding as well that the workers that are involved in these industries, etc., we're still in that emergency phase right now. But those are the two areas that I would say are really critical for you to make sure you're watching and registered for, to hear about those programs as they move forward. Sorry, I'm just double checking if there's any other questions here that we can answer. I do know some people have asked us directly questions related to locking down the city, etc. And no one on this call has the capacity to speak to that. That really is within the municipal government, the health authorities, and whatnot.
I did see a question in regards to if we're keeping kind of tabs on what businesses are closing, and I just want to address that. I will be kind of documenting if an employer is doing a layoff of 50 or more. I typically work one-on-one with that employer and help them and guide them with. It's typically a workforce adjustment where I'm moving those 50 people hopefully into a different type of work or a different company. And obviously this is a different setting where we may not be able to do that for every company. But we do, for myself and for everybody, it's good to know the numbers of people who are going to be affected. And maybe we could help them move into different types of work. So if you are a company or business that is, may have to close their doors temporarily and lay off workers or anything like that, you can touch base with me and I can possibly help you with some of that work.
Thanks, Vanessa. So we are really coming to the end of the call. I do understand there's questions that haven't been answered, but I feel there's a few repeats on questions and things. So what we will do now is take all these questions and try and consolidate them into some answers. We will put them on our socials and that kind of thing. So I'm going to share my screen right now to share with you guys our contact details, etc., that you can get in touch with us. We will also send this to everybody following the call, any of the links that we have, etc. But this gives you this is our website, choosewoodbuffalo.ca/COVID-19. Our email is info@choosewoodbuffalo.ca. All of our socials are so even if you go onto Facebook and you search that, or you can search Wood Buffalo Economic Development, we do post a lot on there on what's coming up. And our phone number, again, if you want to leave us a voicemail, we will try our best to get back to people as soon as possible. It's 1-855-923-2338. I do understand there could be people listening on the line who don't have access to the internet but are phoning in, so please feel free to connect us over the phone on how we can share with you the information. I also want to mention to everybody that we are scheduled to host a second roundtable conversation next week, communications during a crisis. We have Jordan Redshaw, which many of you may be familiar with. He did support the crisis communications during the wildfire in the RMWB, and he now works for National, a PR company out of Calgary, and he will be here, or he will be online with us April 2nd at 10 a.m. Following this call, we will send out a link. We are just literally building these things as we are as we're going here. So we'll send a follow-up link with that to register for that session as well. And we'll keep you guys informed on, as we learn more and more of the topics that you're interested in hearing about, we'll try and build out more conversations where we can share information with everyone. That is it for me. Do any of the panelists have any final last words they want to say before we sign off? Nope. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We really appreciate your time. We are here for you. We hope to be able to support you in any way we can. And please reach out through any of the contacts that I've put up. So I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and thank you.
Thank you guys. Have a good day.
Bye.